If you had told me a year ago that planting a garden in my own backyard would turn into an all-out war with the HOA, I would have laughed. But here I am, fighting for my right to grow tomatoes, while a power-hungry HOA Karen is trying to turn my vegetables into her personal business. It all started with a simple dream. I had always wanted a garden, a peaceful little patch of earth where I could grow fresh vegetables for my family. With grocery prices skyrocketing and everything filled with chemicals these days, I figured, why not grow my own food? Plus, my kids would love it. Fresh tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, it sounded perfect. So, I got to work. I tilled the soil, built raised beds, and carefully planted every seed. My backyard slowly transformed into a lush green paradise. It wasn't just food, it was my escape from the stress of daily life. But HOA, Karen had other plans. Now everyone has that one person in the neighborhood, the one who seems to think they own the entire street. In our HOA, that was Karen Smith, the self-proclaimed enforcer of the neighborhood. She didn't just follow the rules, she made them up. If your grass was 1 inch too long, she'd fine you. If your front door color wasn't neutral enough, she'd demand you repaint it. And when she saw my garden, she lost her mind. One afternoon, as I was watering my plants, I heard the dreaded sound of Karen's heels clicking against my driveway. She marched over, clipboard in hand, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "I noticed you've made some modifications to your yard." I smiled, wiping dirt from my hands. "Yep, I started a vegetable garden. Pretty cool, right?" She didn't even look at it. Instead, she flipped through her clipboard and pulled out a bright pink violation notice. "This is against HOA regulations," she said, handing it to me. "Front and backyard spaces must maintain a decorative aesthetic. No unsightly additions." I frowned, scanning the notice. "Unsightly? It's a garden, not a junkyard." She crossed her arms. "Rules are rules. You have 7 days to remove it, or you'll be fined." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "So let me get this straight. I can plant useless flowers, but I can't grow food for my family?" "That's correct," she said, smiling like she had just won some kind of battle. Then she turned on her heel and strutted away. I looked down at my garden, the tiny sprouts just starting to push through the soil. There was no way I was giving up. So I did the only thing I could. I fought back. The neighborhood revolts. The first thing I did was check the HOA rulebook. I read it cover to cover, and guess what? Nowhere did it say vegetable gardens were banned. Karen was making up rules. So I printed out the section about decorative landscaping and brought it to the next HOA meeting. The moment I walked in, Karen's eyes narrowed. She knew exactly why I was there. I stood up and addressed the room. "I was given a violation for my garden, but nowhere in the HOA rules does it state that vegetable gardens are prohibited." I held up the HOA handbook. "I'd like to formally challenge this fine," Karen scoffed. "It falls under unsightly structures." I smirked. "So do your plastic flamingos, Karen. Should we fine you for those?" The room erupted into muffled laughter. Even the HOA president, an older man named Richard, looked amused. Richard cleared his throat. "Karen, unless you can cite an actual rule, I'm afraid we can't enforce this fine." Karen's face turned red. She muttered something under her breath, but couldn't argue. I thought I had won. I was wrong. Karen's revenge. A week later, my garden was thriving. The tomatoes were ripening, the lettuce was crisp, and I had even started sharing some extra veggies with my neighbors. People loved it. Some even told me they were thinking of starting their own gardens. That's when Karen got desperate. One evening, I came home to find half my garden destroyed. Plants were ripped from the soil, wooden stakes snapped in half, and my irrigation system completely dismantled. I stood there, heart pounding. This wasn't just a random act of vandalism. This was targeted, and I had a pretty good idea who was behind it, catching Karen in the act. I wasn't going to let this slide. I installed a security camera overlooking my backyard, hidden within a tree. If Karen came back, I'd have proof. And sure enough, she did. 2 nights later, at 2 a.m., my motion sensor alert went off. I checked the live feed and there she was, HOA Karen, sneaking into my yard with a pair of garden shears. She was cutting down my tomato plants. A hit record. The shocking twist. The next morning, before I could even confront her, I got another HOA violation letter. Only this time, it wasn't for my garden. It was for unauthorized commercial activity. Confused, I opened it up and read the details. Apparently, someone had reported me for running an illegal farmer's market. That's when I saw it. A flyer. It was advertising fresh homegrown vegetables for sale. Karen's name was on it. She had been stealing my vegetables and selling them. I stared at the paper, my blood boiling. This woman destroyed my garden, stole my crops, and then turned around and tried to profit off them. Oh, it was on, and I was about to make sure Karen got exactly what she deserved. The second I saw that flyer with Karen's name on it, I knew I had her cornered. She wasn't just trying to ruin my garden. She was trying to profit off my hard work. I took a deep breath, staring at the paper in my hands. This wasn't just HOA overreach anymore. This was theft. And if she thought she could get away with it, she had another thing coming. Gathering the evidence. First, I needed proof. I checked my security camera footage again. It was all there. Karen sneaking into my yard, cutting down my tomato plants, and stuffing vegetables into a tote bag. Then I drove to the address listed on the flyer. It was a small pop-up farmer's market in a local park, and right there, under a striped tent, was Karen. She stood proudly behind a table covered in my vegetables. Neatly packed boxes of tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, all labeled locally grown organic produce, with a ridiculous price tag. I felt my fists clench. This woman had ripped plants out of my soil, tried to fine me for growing them, and then turned around and sold them for a profit. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Hey, Karen," I called out as I walked up. Her face went pale. "Oh, hello," she stammered, clearly caught off guard. I picked up one of the cucumbers and held it up to the camera. "Funny, this looks a lot like the ones from my backyard." Karen forced a laugh. "Oh, don't be silly. These are, from a friend's farm." I smirked. "A farm that just so happens to grow vegetables in the same arrangement I had? The same ones that went missing from my yard after you were caught on camera trespassing." Her eyes widened. "That's a wild accusation," she said, voice shaking. I leaned in. "Oh, it's not an accusation, Karen, it's evidence." Then I showed her the video. Her face drained of color. You can't prove that's me." I chuckled. "Oh, I think I can. And so can the cops." She panicked, snatching the flyer from my hand. "This is a misunderstanding, is it?" I asked. "Because I've got two options. I can report you for trespassing, theft, and fraud, or you can make this right." She swallowed hard. What do you want?" Turning the tables on Karen, I wasn't just going to let her get away with this. "First," I said, "you're going to refund every single person you scammed." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my phone. "Or I take this straight to the HOA board, the police, and the entire neighborhood Facebook group." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Fine," she muttered. One by one, she started handing back cash to the customers at her little booth, her face burning with embarrassment. People muttered. Some even demanded extra money for the scam. But I wasn't done. "You're also going to announce, publicly, that my garden is fully allowed under HOA rules." Her hands curled into fists. "That's not up to me." "Actually," I smirked, "it is. Since you're on the HOA board and love making up rules, I suggest you start undoing the ones you lied about." Her face twisted with anger, but she had no choice. Right there, in front of the crowd, she reluctantly admitted that vegetable gardens were not against HOA rules. But the final blow? I made her put up a public apology sign at the farmer's market. A big one. "I, Karen Smith, apologize for wrongfully fining a homeowner and attempting to sell stolen produce. Please support real, local farmers." The crowd erupted into laughter. Karen was shaking with rage, but she knew she had lost. The HOA takes action. The next morning, I sent everything, the video evidence, the flyers, and even witness statements, to the HOA board. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. By the next HOA meeting, Karen was officially removed from the board. The other members, most of whom were just as sick of her power-hungry antics as I was, voted her out unanimously. I sat in the front row, arms crossed, watching her storm out of the room, humiliated, and my garden still thriving, bigger and better than ever. The best revenge, success. With Karen out of the way, my garden flourished. Neighbors started coming over to trade vegetables, swap gardening tips, and even plant their own. And the best part, a few weeks later, I held a free farmer's market right in my front yard. I didn't charge a dime. People came from all over the neighborhood, taking fresh produce home with smiles on their faces. It was everything I had envisioned when I first planted that garden. And Karen, she had to watch from her porch, powerless. Because in the end, I didn't just beat her, I turned her petty scheme into something amazing. And that was the sweetest victory of all. Just when I thought the drama was over, the HOA pulled a move that left me speechless. I had taken down Kerren, exposed her scam, and held my own farmer's market in the front yard. The neighborhood loved it, and my garden was thriving. For the first time, everything felt peaceful. But of course, HOAs never go down without a fight. The HOA's last-ditch effort. A week after Karen was removed from the board, I got a certified letter in the mail. When I opened it, my jaw dropped. Effective immediately, vegetable gardens are banned in all front and backyard spaces under HOA jurisdiction. I reread the words, my hands shaking with disbelief. They actually changed the rules. Not only that, they retroactively fined me $3,000 for violations dating back to the original complaint. This was war. I stormed into the next HOA meeting, letter in hand. As soon as I walked in, all eyes turned to me. I held up the letter. Are you people serious? The HOA president, Richard, cleared his throat. After reviewing community concerns, we decided that vegetable gardens do not align with the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. I laughed loudly. That's funny because I remember you saying at the last meeting that vegetable gardens were fine. He adjusted his tie. Well, policies evolve. I narrowed my eyes. You mean you're mad that I exposed Kerren for stealing my vegetables and selling them? A few board members looked uncomfortable. One even avoided eye contact. Richard straightened his back. The decision is final. You have 2 weeks to remove your garden, or the HOA will escalate enforcement. I crossed my arms. And what exactly does escalate enforcement mean? Richard smirked. That's for the legal team to decide. That's when I knew this wasn't just about my garden. They wanted revenge. Lawyer you, I wasn't going to play their game. If they wanted to escalate things, fine. I called up a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. After explaining everything, the fake fines, Karen's corruption, the rule change, he actually laughed. You've got them cornered, he said. They're retaliating, and that's illegal. Turns out, an HOA can't change a rule and retroactively fine someone for breaking it before the rule even existed. That's fraud. So, my lawyer sent them a legal demand letter. It laid out the facts. Retaliation is illegal. Changing a rule after the fact doesn't justify retroactive fines. If they didn't drop the fine and allow my garden to stay, we were taking them to court. Oh, and the best part. We sent copies of the letter to every single homeowner in the neighborhood. The HOA melts down. The response was immediate. Within 24 hours, my inbox exploded. Neighbors were furious. Many of them had been harassed by the HOA over minor things. Mailboxes, paint colors, even parking their own cars in their own driveways. And now they saw how corrupt the board really was. At the next meeting, dozens of homeowners showed up, and they weren't quiet. I moved to remove Richard as HOA president. One homeowner shouted, "Seconded." Another called out. Richard's face turned beet red. "This is out of order." "No," I interrupted, holding up a printed copy of the HOA bylaw. According to Section 14B, any homeowner can call for a board member's removal with majority support. The room erupted in cheers. One by one, people voted Richard out. Then they moved to reverse the garden ban entirely. By the end of the meeting, I wasn't the one in trouble. The HOA was. And just like that, the war was over. Victory tastes like fresh vegetables. With the corrupt board members gone, the new HOA leadership actually supported my garden. They even asked me to help set up a community garden for the neighborhood. It was a complete 180. Karen, she moved out a month later. Apparently she couldn't handle living in a neighborhood where people actually liked fresh food. And Richard, well, last I heard, he's still bitter. But with no HOA power left, he's just another homeowner with an opinion no one cares about. As for me, I'm still growing my vegetables, and I haven't paid a single dime in HOA fines since, because in the end, the best revenge is living well. The war with the HOA was over. I had won. Karen, gone. Richard, removed from power. The ridiculous rule against gardens, completely reversed. But something even bigger happened after that. Something I never saw coming. My story goes viral. A week after the final HOA meeting, I got a call from a local news station. Apparently, one of my neighbors had shared my story on social media, and it blew up. Thousands of people, many dealing with their own nightmare HOAs, started sharing their experiences. The news reporter wanted to interview me on camera. At first, I hesitated. I had already won. Did I really need to put myself out there even more? But then I thought about all the other homeowners being bullied by their HOAs. If my story could help them fight back, then why not? So I agreed. When the segment aired, the response was insane. People from all over the country started messaging me, some offering support, others sharing their own horror stories. I realized something big. This wasn't just my battle. Homeowners associations everywhere were abusing their power. I become the HOA's worst nightmare. That's when I got an idea. If my experience helped expose corruption in my neighborhood, why not help others do the same? So I started a YouTube channel. I called it HOA Horror Stories. The first video, my own story, the garden war, Kerren scam, the fines, and how I took them all down. It went viral within a week. People flooded the comments, sharing their own experiences. Some even sent me their HOA letters and asked for advice. I started making videos breaking down HOA bylaws, exposing HOA fraud, and helping people fight back. One guy emailed me saying his HOA was fining him $500 for having a blue front door. And the other woman said her HOA stole her car because it was too old looking. These people weren't just upset, they were desperate for help. So I helped them. I brought on lawyers, interviewed former HOA board members, and even highlighted people who had beaten their HOAs like I did. The more I posted, the more the channel grew. Within a few months, I had hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And guess who noticed? The HOA tries and fails to shut me down. One day, I got a cease and desist letter from my former HOA. The letter claimed that my videos were defamatory and damaging to the reputation of the neighborhood. I laughed so hard I almost fell out of my chair. They weren't mad because I was lying. They were mad because I was telling the truth. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer, who basically told them to go pound sand. And the best part, I made a video reading the letter out loud, with my lawyer explaining on camera how everything I did was legal. That video hit 1 million views in 3 days, from victim to HOA watchdog. At that point, my little revenge had turned into something bigger than I ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was helping homeowners all over the country fight back. More people started sending me their HOA nightmares. Some even hired lawyers after watching my videos and won their cases. A few homeowners banded together and actually overthrew their entire HOA boards. And Karen? Oh, she definitely saw the videos. I got an anonymous email one day. No name, no introduction, just 2 words. Screw you. I smiled. Looks like she wasn't enjoying the fame. The best revenge is freedom. Looking back, it's crazy to think all of this started because of a vegetable garden. But in the end, I didn't just win a battle. I helped spark a movement. Now, my garden thrives bigger than ever. My neighbors come over all the time to grab fresh produce. Some have even started their own gardens. And the HOA, they know better than to mess with me, because the moment they try, it's going on YouTube and the whole world will know.